So, Danny, we're here for episode 5 of Gen Z Explained, and today we're going to be talking about Gen Z and masculinity.
This is Gen Z Explained, not Gen Z. Do you know what I mean?
So, there's been a lot of commentary about how there's never been more space politically between Gen Z men and Gen Z women, that in a kind of narrative violation, Gen Z men are actually more conservative than millennial and Gen X men, and that there's not a lot that Gen Z men and Gen Z women see eye to eye on politically. Set the scene for me. What's happening with Gen Z men?
Well, firstly, you're completely right. 2024 presidential election, Kamala Harris has an 18-point win among Gen Z women, whereas Donald Trump has a 14-point win, so completely opposite with Gen Z men.
Yeah.
When you say set the scene, I think immediately to growing up. So I'll give you some, I suppose, anecdotes. So I went to an all-boys school. I played sports with boys. Most of my friends were boys. And I bore witness to this phenomenon that we've been seeing. And by phenomenon, I mean the TV show Adolescence came out like a month ago now. Lots of people have been talking about the role of algorithms radicalizing young men. But equally, let's start by saying the Gen Z upbringing for young men is set against a backdrop of, as the Financial Times wrote a great article about, young men for the first time really in history, it's been happening slowly over the past few decades, have been declining in tertiary education, in employment and in schooling results. And young women, on the other hand, happily have been advancing in those three areas. And it's starting to be such that, for example, in the UK, young women now are earning more than young men. I think that to start with, I have been able to observe among some of my peers, male peers, a sort of insecurity, a bit of a sense of threat that, okay, what is the male role in the world now? There is a twisted sort of nostalgia that famous people like Andrew Tate, for example, draw on in saying men used to be strong, men used to be breadwinners, men used to have this defined role in life. And now for lots of young men, they're wondering what their place is. I think that's part of Donald Trump's appeal. For example, I think men saw, yes, he delineates for us a role, a return to a time that was far more clear to us. So I've seen that a bit. I've seen and sometimes felt personally uncomfortable being on social media. We talked earlier about something called the man or the bear question. It's been viral on TikTok for a while, where people would be vox popped being asked, would you rather be alone in a forest with a man or a bear? And the answer often given is with a bear. And the point is to show how unsafe lots of women feel around men. And, you know, people in the comments will say stuff like, well, at least the bear wouldn't ask, like, what was I wearing to determine whether I deserved being hurt? Like that sort of thing.
Right.
And that's meant to like show a point. But for example, for me growing up seeing that sort of thing, it does make you quite uncomfortable being lumped in with a pretty horrible group of people.
Yeah. What I'm hearing is that there's a cohort of men who do have this kind of pain and insecurity about their place in the world in like a heterosexual relationship. For example, I think things have changed, and as you say, happily, insofar as women have become more economically empowered. But that also means that the traditional kind of yin and yang role that maybe men and women played in heterosexual relationships, and the very comfortable scripts that people fell into, where the man was the strong breadwinner, the kind of, you know, anchor, the rock of the family, and then the woman was the homemaker, the mother, the person who was, you know, soft and nurturing. That was perhaps a polarity that had existed for many centuries, and so there was a comfortable set of scripts and roles that men and women were expected to, but, you know, for some time felt quite natural slotting into. And then in the last, say, 70 years, there has been this period of great economic empowerment and educational empowerment for women, where suddenly, as you say, young women are just as educated as men. They earn just as much as men. They could even start out earning men. There's more female lawyers graduating. I think, there's
I'm studying law.
increasingly.
My
Yeah.
classes are like 70% women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's, it's natural that there's some disturbance to the traditional kind of balance. And so in this period of flux, it's natural to expect some people to think, oh, I feel quite insecure about what my role in all of this is. What do you think is a productive way to engage with that kind of sense of maybe loss of direction and unsureness about their place in the world that some men are feeling, that Andrew Tate and Donald Trump is doing a really good job of channeling into anger and polarization? But do you think there's another way to kind of meet those men where they're at?
Yeah, so it's a tough and difficult and quite intimidating conversation to have. Julia Gillard works with an institute, and last year they partnered, I think, with Ipsos and had this really interesting and scary, quite troubling finding, which was that of all the age groups among men, the group which is exhibiting the most anti-feminist tendencies isn't like what you'd expect, like maybe my grandfather's group, but mine, Gen Z men. And Julia Gillard's takeaway, I think this was in an interview for The Australian, was that, okay, young men are deserting the feminist movement. We need young men because if we want to fight against violence towards women, for example, if we want to work towards greater equality, all that sort of thing, young men in the group we need to be allying with us, working with us, having a positive sentiment, and we're losing them. Her takeaway was that therefore the feminist movement needs to be analytical and a bit self-critical and perhaps have a more welcoming dialogue. It's tough because it's like, and especially me as a man saying, well, to turn around and say to women, you should worry about stepping on men's toes, it's a difficult truth to sort of say, isn't it? But I mean, speaking pragmatically, the reason I see so many young people, peers, kids I've grown up with, exhibiting really regressive attitudes towards women is often because I think, fairly or unfairly, they feel alienated.
Yes.
They feel villainized. They feel guilty for things they don't think they've done. An example is the term toxic masculinity. So I think that's a fair term. I think it's like when I hear that word, I know what people are talking about. But a large group of young men have grown up thinking
that all manifestations of masculinity
Yeah,
were
it just-
able to be tarred with that same brush of being toxic, right?
yeah, like it just means masculinity is toxic, which is their own misunderstanding. Like grammatically, that's not what it means, but that's how the term is viewed.
Yeah.
And they feel like pissed off by that. Same with the man versus bear thing. Same even with the, like where in Sydney, I saw the other day, lady walking down the street wearing a kill all men shirt, like that sort of thing, which is empowering and like cool. But I think quite a few men would be like, what did I do? And therefore natural allies of the feminist movement might incrementally be getting more turned off it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, there are some phrases perhaps that are, feminist rallying cries that I think do something quite unfortunate, which is they flatten men to a caricature, and they actually fail to allow us to engage with individual men as full-blooded, complex individuals who each have their individual struggles and sit at the intersection of lots of things that shape, how they're perceived and how they move through the world and the crosses they bear. I think there are lots of intersections that aren't even visible to the naked eye, which strongly informs the kind of things that people have struggled with, whether they have mental illnesses, whether they were raised in a kind of low SES environment and then catapulted into an environment where they don't know a lot of the social norms and don't know how to fit in. That kind of shapes how comfortable and how privileged somebody is. But, I've seen men who perhaps present like they have all of the hallmarks of privilege. They're white and and they're tall and they're straight. And then so they get really caricatured as this cis het straight white man for whom there's no place in a conversation about feminism and about, you know, equal access and about equal opportunity. And I think that's a real shame.
It's a really tough thing to talk about. We have lots of mums listening to us, probably mums of boys included in that group. Yes. Typically, my strongest friendships have been with mothers.
Yeah.
Says a lot about me. Love them though. And I think with the media discourse about what's happening with young men, there's this tendency to be like, this is like a monstrous attitudes that are happening. And they are. But it's like optimistic isn't the right word, but just like seeing how it doesn't have to be this way. And I think the problem in part, and I'm thinking about parents listening and wondering, well, I love my son. This attitude he's displaying is in him. And it's difficult because it's like your son probably spends a third of his day on his phone and social media is not geared towards having productive discussions about this. There's this viral clip of discourse between two people and a guy is saying, well, actually young men kill themselves more. Young men go through these issues, to like draw attention to that. And a young woman then says in response, and who set that system up? And that's become a viral soundbite. And it's like kind of empowering. It's like a smackdown to like men complaining. And again, I see that side, which is that like in the scheme of things, clearly it's women who have such a harder time than young men, right? So why should women have to be worrying about how men are feeling? Why should they have to bring them into the fold? And it's that sort of thing that like I think, well, it could be empowering for some people, for lots of young men seeing it.
It's
They're
alienating,
like, I didn't set up that system.
Exactly. I think once again, it's conflating patriarchy, a system which I think holds both men and women in straitjackets and constrains the ways in which they can move through the world and the expectations foisted upon them as only one way they should be, with individual men who I think, you know, suffer maybe not to the same extent, maybe not in the same way as women who suffer under patriarchy, but still are not the oppressors. They are also subjects of a system that they didn't individually create, right? And that they inherited from a long history. So I think saying, oh, I'm going to invalidate the problems that you individually and that men as a cohort currently have by blaming these kind of historical figures who set that up, I think that is flattening people to a caricature. It's failing to understand individuals complexly, and it makes them feel shut out of the conversation. It makes them feel shut out of feminism, and I think turns them to, you know, the Andrew Tates and Jordan Petersons of the world who, you know, kind of sometimes whistleblow this more socially acceptable notion of, you know, understanding these men, but then sometimes pull them into a way of thinking that can have overtly misogynistic tones.
And that's the hard part, like by taking this purist stance and saying like, no, we're not going to think about young men. It's women who are having harder experiences. We're going to focus on that, which again, like understandable.
Yeah.
The direct result of that is, okay, you forfeit a needed group.
Yes.
That you need coming with you on the movement.
Yes.
And accept that many of them are going to go over to this terrible echo chamber online.
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of like solutions, how is this remedied when we see attitudes getting worse? It's a tough one. In Australia, they're mulling over a social media ban, and we've talked about that a little bit before. But there's well, firstly, I don't know. What do you reckon? Do you have any solution ideas?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I wonder if the language that we use actually could play a role. A word that I don't really love these days is mansplaining. So that's kind of when you know, say, oh, this man explained to me this concept that I already knew, or, you know, they spoke over me in a meeting to say something that was kind of obvious. And it's a way of kind of, I think, dismissing, slightly caricaturing the moment when a man, you know, expounds on a set of facts. I think that I think that using that language to kind of like shut people down or freeze them out of a conversation creates this unnecessary moment of disconnection, right? I think the truth is that a lot of men are socialized from a young age to connect with people by sharing facts. My boyfriend loves to kind of talk about, history, architecture, the population of different regional cities
Men are
that
just
we
boys,
visit.
aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Men, I think,
Like, I love
the
trains.
kinds
Like-
of stories they were encouraged to tell
Yeah.
as young children were facts about the world.
Like tell you about the Roman Empire.
Yeah,
or
they'll
something.
tell you exactly. Men think about the Roman Empire to an order of magnitude more than women expected them to, right? Because that's how men relate to each other. Like, I think, if you ever kind of are a fly on a wall to a group of old male friends catching up, the kinds of conversations they have aren't really about their lives. They're like, what do you think Putin is going to do? Right? Or like, did you know the population of Bowral is like 100,000 or something? It's like, I think explaining things about the world and being, extroverted thinkers, maybe taking on the role to fill up space in a conversation, be interesting, that's a way
Like how
that
they
men
connect, yeah.
And I don't think that there's necessarily something condescending or, sexist or self-aggrandizing about when they do that. Sure, there are some men who are arrogant and they should be mindful of the space they take up in a conversation, and they should hold space for women who are more qualified to talk about the issue. Like, of course, I've been in meetings with those men, but equally, I think slapping down every instance of a man trying to connect by talking and making them feel quite shy and reticent to enter a conversation because they don't want to mansplain. I wonder if that's actually constructive.
It's also, I think, a case of, and I quoted the Julia Gillard thing because I appreciated the practicality of what she was saying, because like it must be really demoralizing for this movement to have to like move slowly, right? Like maybe sort of 5 years ago 10 years ago now with like Me Too and stuff, maybe if you're speaking about like the effect of what happened, you could say that the feminist movement moved too quickly for men. Do you agree? Because like what I'm saying is what Julia Gillard suggested is, and what other people have suggested with maybe having a more welcoming discourse so that they can bring young men back into the, momentum. That means taking a step back and being a bit less like purist about things.
I don't know if
Do you think it is a
something-
step back, or do you think like slowing things down? Or
I think once again, it's just about trying to understand one another, right? I think, boys, when they are grown up, the messages they hear is that they have to be strong. They can't have to be brave. They shouldn't cry. It's not, don't be a wuss. They should.
And even if that's not happening like explicitly now, it's still like a thing, right? Like you grow up, the heroes you're supposed to have are like tough AFL players,
exactly.
like rugby.
Exactly, right. Yeah, exactly. You're socialized with these role models that are, hardy, determined, men. I think, say if you go to a boys' school, it's pretty rough and tumble. I don't think necessarily people like have that much appetite to hear about your feelings. I think in contrast, the way that women are socialized is lots of kind of encouragement to be soft and nurturing and dainty, and talk about their feelings and talk about themselves and connect with their feelings. And I think there's less harsh social punishment for a girl who cries, or so still we have the legacy kind of building blocks of these gender roles, right? But then you grow up and then we work in this kind of workplace or corporate environment where men and women are kind of expected to be exactly the same, and maybe in kind of like heterosexual relationships between young people, it's now kind of increasingly unclear what the gender roles are meant to be. And so I think there is this feeling of like dislocation and unsureness about the place of men in the world. And I think it's like, let's try to speak to that and understand what's there and understand the pain that's there. So it's not about like feminism moving too fast, but I think it's like, let's recognize that change can lead to difficulties adjusting for both men and women, and let's try to really see each other in that conversation.
I think that would also then recognize intentions. So like one of my friends who's just started seeing just started seeing his now girlfriend. I remember before their first date, he called me and he was like, do you think I should pay for like things, or is that like sexist? Like we should split the bill. And I noticed this among like some of my male friends, like they have this vibe of maybe walking on eggshells a bit, and they mean the best, but can be like a bit heightened. They don't want to get like cancelled and they don't want to put a foot out of line, which is a lovely, I don't know, and maybe because I keep such great company, they're the type of people that's fine for, and they'll be okay. But you can see how there's been this swing back more broadly among young men, because maybe it feels unsustainable or exhausting walking on eggshells.
Yeah. There's also like, I think, interpretation and maybe not assuming best intent. Like sometimes female friends will be like, oh, I went on a date with this guy and he was so arrogant. He was so conceited. He talked about himself the whole time. He didn't ask me a single question about myself. He clearly thinks that I have nothing interesting to say because, you know, he's a chauvinist, right? And look, you don't know. Maybe that's all completely true. But I think if you were to try to give the benefit of the doubt, I think, you know, you could say, look, men are often socialized to have a more declarative style in conversation. They kind of like just assert things, they tell you about their day. Maybe the expectation is that you will also tell them about your day. You'll find some things you have in common and you'll kind of riff on that. And that's kind of how men talk to each other.
And then get to the Roman Empire. Yeah.
So what do you think Fisher will do? Whereas women are socialized to not do that. I think, you know, if a woman came and take up a lot of space and just started talking about themselves, you know, I think there's like various corrections that they'll have gotten over the course of their life to not be so self-centered or whatever. So I think a lot of women develop a more question-asking style of conversations where they expect to ask their counterpart questions and be asked questions in return. And they require like a kind of permission structure, such as a question, to volunteer information. And I think a reframe like that means that we don't have to kind of be like, oh, that person was super conceited and had no concern for me. It's like, okay, maybe that's true. Maybe we have a different conversation style, and that could actually be the intention that sits behind it. So I think just, I think it's possible to, through assuming good intent, try to see whether like there's a reframe such that we don't have to jump to conclusions that people are, you know, chauvinists or man haters, and actually find that there's like quite a lot of common ground, and we're just like, you know, people with our own failings trying to connect with other people.
While we have like talked about good intentions and maybe that there's this great group of natural allies of feminism who are being lost, like it is obviously important to recognize that the manosphere, which is the term given to this corner of the internet and social media where young men are being radicalized with these pretty backward opinions, part of that isn't made up of like good guys who have like taken the wrong turn and been influenced.
Yeah.
There are some pretty horrible.
Dark and.
Yeah. Like there was a school in Melbourne last year that was in the headlines because a group of kids like made their female teachers or classmates, I can't remember, into a list ranked from like wife to like then someone they wouldn't even rape. Like there's that sort of thing. Yeah. And I don't think there's an explanation for, well, they had Andrew Tate. Like that's just like sort of.
The red pill and incel subcultures, I think, hold a lot of, I would say like very overtly misogynistic and violent beliefs about women, which is really concerning.
There's this difficult here with like incel involuntary celibate young men, this difficult intersection between pop culture and something really serious. We've talked in a previous episode when we talked about Gen Z slang about Sigma and Alpha and how it's like kind of this funny term like a lone outsider, wolf solo like person, like wow, Jessy working on a computer in a dark room, that's so Sigma. That comes from this like part of the internet where these boys and men who are incels or who don't get a lot of attention from women, who then like retreat into this world of like I'm a loner but I'm underestimated and women are horrible and they don't get me. And
yeah,
like,
but they also, I think, buy into a certain myth that's perpetuated that that women are really shallow, and the way to appeal to women and get girls is to become a Chad, which is, you know, I don't know, we can maybe put it on the screen, but there's like a drawing of a Chad in like a black shirt showing his pecs with like a really strong jaw. Yeah. And the way to become a Chad is like get cosmetic surgery, like get jaw surgery. If you have a strong jaw, women will like fall over themselves for you, men will respect you, all of your problems will be solved. And basically it reduces, I think, women to, again, a caricature of somebody who, you know, is only attracted to this conventionally alpha embodiment of a man, and I think imagines women to be quite shallow and simple-minded in things. So yeah, I think there's something quite troubling there. Do you have any insight about what it is that draws people to the manosphere and what it's like in that part of the internet?
I think before answering that, also like the Alpha Sigma stuff is based in part, as we've mentioned, on the film American Psycho about this like banker who kills women, which is meant to be really ironic.
Right.
And like there's this scene where they compare their business cards and who's got the better business card, and they talk shit about their girlfriends, which is meant to be ironic and show like take the mickey out of these people.
I see.
There's this whole generation of young men who are like, that's so cool.
Right.
It's very sad. Why is it like this? We haven't talked about porn.
Okay.
And I think that plays a big role. Why haven't we talked about porn? Would it be fair to say that Gen Z men are the first group of men to be able to just like view sex before engaging in it? Did millennials have that?
Yes, you guys didn't invent the internet. We did.
Yeah, but wasn't it like in like internet cafes or something when you were growing up? But seriously?
Look, I think there's differences between older, like the oldest millennial is 44. I'm like one of the youngest millennials. I'm 30. There's probably some point in time where like you could access porn quite freely.
But I suppose like
device.
young people now have mobile phones quite young.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Like really high speed internet. Yeah.
High speed. The internet surely has one speed.
Are you too young to like remember like 3G?
As in like the 4G phone.
Like, you know how now we have 5G?
Just never really thought about it. But yeah, what's 3G?
3G was just like it was like much slower than 5. Like we just thought it was normal at the time, but like you couldn't load you couldn't watch like high res porn on your phone on 3G. It like wouldn't load.
So when was 3G? Was that when you were growing up?
Yeah.
How old?
Like 3G.
I love 3G,
guys. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so yeah, we're the first high res porn generation then, I suppose. So yeah, and that's this is makes me uncomfortable to talk about because it's naughty. Okay, and the reason I bring up porn slightly like self-consciously is that firstly, my like dad's generation, I'm guessing grew like maybe they had Playboy magazine and stuff, which were like an editorial board and a stylist picking whatever happened in there, which had its like many problems, I'm sure. But compared to like a 12-year-old being able to like go online and find out all sorts of like high-res terrible stuff is very different. And I'm sure that's a big contributor to like sexual violence, but also seeing women in a different light. Our listener's question today is about single-sex schools. To boys who go to all boys schools or who don't have much interaction with women growing up, women to them, especially young women, are probably a big part of them are represented on their phone. They're the people they see having sex on their phone
Right.
in a
Okay.
highly
So they
unrealistic
have a
way.
flattened understanding of females and female sexuality.
Probably, yeah.
Okay, Danny, it's time for our Is It Cringe of the week. This week's Is It Cringe is it cringe when people who are not Gen Z use Gen Z slang like slay? It's giving. that
100,000%.
It's cringe.
Yeah.
At what point? Is it cringe if I use it?
How do I say this? Let me illustrate this to you in a different way.
Okay.
If it's like completely out of place, like I saw this TikTok of this maybe 60-year-old mum
Oh, yeah.
whose daughter had given her a script of words of
Yeah.
Gen Z-isms,
Yeah.
and she was FaceTiming her other daughter, I'm assuming, and like using the words, and the daughter was like, why is she doing this? That was fun.
Yeah,
But
okay.
if
Have you also seen those TikToks where it's like really endearing older people, like say a 60-year-old principal of a school being like, it's giving,
yeah. That's good.
HSCs, they slayed. Like that's
Yeah.
really cute.
Yeah. And they like don't, you can tell they have no idea what they're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that. If it's maybe like that particular age group of person who wants to be young, this is not you, I'm talking about some other people. Maybe like 37-year-old
Oh,
men and women, they want to be like, slay, that's slay, right? I'm young, like that. That's cringe. Like, get your own thing. Right?
okay. So is it better if they just don't try to kind of understand that slang? They don't use it.
I think just like self-awareness is always good.
Got it.
Maybe, yeah, like they're taking the piss instead. I don't know. But does that age group have words? Did they have their own words?
Yeah, we have our own culture.
I said this wasn't you. I was not thinking of you. You're the best.
We had Evanescence and Green Day and Fall Out Boy,
Is Green Day not a band?
Linkin Park. Yeah.
But do you have words? You don't have words. That is sad.
Interesting. What are our words?
Lol's ours.
Well,
No, LOL is yours. LOL is ours.
Lo-
You wouldn't have
I
said growing.
said it all through high school. Lol was vocalized.
Okay, wait. Guess the meaning of these millennial words. What about biffle?
Best friends for life?
Yeah. But what's the effect? What's the like, if I said, oh, yeah, they're my biffle, what would be the vibe of that?
You've had a stroke and you can't speak properly. Wait, what is the vibe of it? Is it like
What would you guys say? Biffle. BFFL. But like not that earnest. You would have multiple
Yeah.
biffles.
Yeah.
Like
Not
it's
like
not
your
like
bestest,
this person is like actually my ride or die. Like they are on speed dial. If I have a stroke,
I find that interesting.
it would
Gen Z
just be
has
like
bestie,
yeah.
which
It would
is kind of an
probably be
annoying
similar
word.
to
But people will be like, "Hey, bestie." I'm like, "I am not your bestie." Unless I am dramatically misunderstanding things. Yes, Jesse, we've been over it. Boundaries. That's a really interesting sort of thing to do. I would never do that.
What are some? Will, what's millennial slang? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What does BAE stand for?
Does that stand for something?
Yeah,
I
that
thought it
stands for
meant, like,
something.
babe.
No, it means it stands for something.
I have no idea.
Before anyone else.
Ew! That is so embarrassing. Sorry.
I love our culture.
What are others? But I hate knowing that before anyone else.
Okay, what about BRB?
Be right back. Is that I did this thing for the Age an article for the Age where I used a dumb phone for a week,
Yeah,
like a flip phone,
Yeah.
and I had to text and not use my smartphone, and I had to text my friends, and I was like, I see why people abbreviate shit. It took like 3 hours to ask, like, when are we having coffee, or I don't know what I was saying.
Oh, I know. Okay, what about WUU2?
Woo too. I don't know.
Guess.
I have no idea.
Okay, if I messaged you, W2, question mark.
Would you too? Like,
What are you up to? It's how you start a conversation. Like MSN, you log on after school, you talk to like your friend, your crush, you're like
cool.
W2.
Wow. In 3G.
In 3G, yeah,
Cool.
because nothing would buffer. You couldn't watch porn. Cut that.
Those are the bloody days. Some of these words still exist but have evolved. LOL,
Yeah.
capital LOL, is now all lowercase lol.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean I've just laughed out loud. It's like, I'm bored, lol. Do you want to go have lunch?
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes when using like terms
Sometimes I
like,
send lol just to be like, I saw your message.
Yeah, you do that, yeah. Also, Jessy the other day, Jessy again is my boss. We work at a communications firm.
I think the audience understands.
I don't know, 12 new listeners who are just tuning in. And Jessy gave me this, I was doing a task and I was not doing it quickly enough. So she texted, please time box this XOXO, which
What did you
gave
take
it-
from that?
I understood that the vibe of it was to like make it softer. But I sort of read it as like, time box this. Yes, it's demanding XOXO. You know what I mean? And it's not demanding. Like you pay me a wage. I didn't think it was demanding, but I was happy to do that quicker.
Love that. Well, that takes us to the end of our episode about Gen Z and masculinity. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to follow and subscribe, and write into us if you have audience questions you'd like us to answer for next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.